schools after the 2015 assault at Spring Valley that was recorded and intervened by Nia Kinney. Shout out to Nia Kinney. In Columbia, South Carolina. And in that moment, the alliance was forever changed as young people mounted what was a national participatory campaign to make sure that Nia and Shakara both had the charges dropped and that no harm was had for them. But along the way, we began to notice and see other young people begin to record and report incidents of school police violence. And we couldn't turn back. We couldn't look back. And so we made a decision that we were going to be a commitment, that we were going to stand and fight with young people by their side. And so the campaign to around Police Free Schools really comes out of that moment, comes out of the 100+ assaults that have been documented that ironically have stopped happening now that students aren't in school. And it really moved us towards really looking at abolition and what it means to be an abolition in schools, and really understanding that although we say the school to prison pipeline in so many levels, so many ways, our schools are already prisons. And so that is what brings us here. That's what guides us into offering this workshop. As we know, even under COVID, as we've seen, both in the desperate impact of infection rates and deaths around Black, Brown, and other oppressed communities under COVID-19, we've also seen the continued police harassment, beating, death, murder by those same police forces. And we've been clear that it's the same police officer that's killing us out on the street. It's the same police officer that was beating our kids and our young folks in schools. And they'll be the same police that's surveilling us online under COVID-19. But enough of my talking, enough of my introduction. We will give y'all a chance to talk to each other. And so I'm going to kick it over to Saudia from the Philadelphia Student Union to take us into group breakouts.
Cool. Thanks, Jonathan. So we're about to do a pair share activity, as Jomo mentioned, to build and deepen the connections that we have with one another. So we ask that you all in your pair shares spend 10 minutes answering 2 questions. So the first question is, what brought you to this Know Your Rights training? And then the second question is, what do you hope to get out of today? So you're gonna have 10 minutes to do this. You're gonna get a 1-minute reminder, and then we're gonna come back to the larger group and ask a couple of volunteers to report back on what was discussed.
Hey, I just came back because the breakout room that I was in was by myself.
Oh, okay. Let me see. All right, well, maybe we could keep this breakout group. All right. So do you all want to just do the check-in?
I don't mind. So, what's the prompt?
All right. So the prompt is, what brought you to this Know Your Rights training? And then what do you hope to get out of the training?
I mean, I could speak. So I am a part of a few different like organizing networks in Connecticut. And I actually just received a newsletter, literally like not even an hour ago, that was like, hey, there's this training that's happening. Maybe you want to join on. So I was like, yeah, definitely. Because I am really interested to see what the conversation looks like and if it applies to what's happening in the city that I live in Waterbury, Connecticut. So that's where I'm coming from.
Awesome. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I'll speak. My name is Zach, with the Black Organizing Project in Oakland. And once I got the information that we'll be going over surveillance, I really was looking forward to it because I've never gotten the information. I'm not really, I don't know too much about it, but I've known all my life that we've been surveillance and there's always cameras all the way, always around. So I was definitely looking forward to getting some insights I can give down to the youth. I'm also a youth organizer, so all this information would be great to give down to them.
Awesome. Hopefully we can be able to send out resources and the recording of this for just in case you want to run some through the content with young people.
Definitely will. I know. I love the way that we started with like the music and the warm up. I thought that was pretty outstanding. That was pretty good.
Awesome.
It was a nice warm up for us.
Awesome. Anyone else? I think we have 3 other folks in the group.
I can go next. My name is Shira. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. My org is Freedom Inc. I'm one of the youth coordinators at Freedom Inc. And what was the question? I'm sorry.
What brought you to the training, and then something that you would want to get out of the training today?
What brought me here was one of my directors had sent it to me and was just saying how we could get more information to bring back to the youth. Because we have a group with a whole bunch of younger folks and younger girls that we can just bring back and give it to them or introduce it to them.
Sounds dope. I'm rocking my Freedom Inc. Shirt today.
That's cool. I seen it. I was like, oh, I got it on too.
That's what's up. Other folks?
I can go. What brought me to this training is as a youth organizer, just trying to learn more about how surveillance impacts students, but also just listening to what students have to say and any experiences that they have to share, and kind of just making sure that they're at the center of this conversation and also the solutions.
That's right. We're going to see some stories from some young people and then hopefully be able to open it up for some questions and more stories at the end. All right, Elaine, do you want to go?
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry. I'm sorry there's noise in the background. That's why I didn't want to go first. But my name's Elaine. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm with Prism. But I came here on like my own accord because I saw it. I'm not sure where I saw it, but I wanted to learn more about like my own rights as a high school student because I've had like weird experiences at my own high school with the way that they want to conduct like tests and scoring. It's just very weird, and I'm really excited to like just make sure my rights aren't being violated and no more in general, basically.
That's what's up. Thank you for sharing. Welcome, Alejandro. We're just talking. We did a small pair share. So we're just sharing and talking about what brought us to the training today. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to share.
Hi, sorry, I'm on my car, so if it cuts down at some point, that's totally me. But thank you everyone for being here. My name is Alex. I'm with Padres and Jóvenes Unidos. I am the lead organizer. So I mean, just here to learn more about it. We've been through some training like this before, but I think, especially right now, the time that we're going through right now, I want to learn more about how policing is still happening to students in schools. As we know, like policing against our community never stops. So they always find a new way to do it. So just here to learn more about how everything is changing as things change in our community too.
All right. Well, welcome, Matt. I see we got Matt and then Rosie also joined us. We're just doing some small group conversations, and then we're gonna, in about 50 seconds, go back to the large group.
Great. Yeah, I think I was in a small group with someone who wanted their computer, so I just kind of dipped out.
Yeah, okay.
Same here with Matt. I was just in a breakout room with Betty, and her and I had shared out, so we just like left the breakout room, so we're here.
All right, perfect. Well, good. You got in early.
Right.
All right, we see everybody joining.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay, Betty, I see you with the Black Cowboys. No, that's right. All right. Real quick, as folks are coming back, I forgot to do the little quick tech check to make sure people know what they're doing. So if you had a really great one-on-one, you met somebody new, go ahead in the reaction, give me a applause or a thumbs up in the reaction box at the bottom, what is this, bottom right of your screen. So let's check. I see, all right, Tyler, thumbs up, clap. All right, I'm gonna hit mine. I met Sabrina from Padres, powerful new organizer. So welcome to the movement. And then if you click the chat box, the chat feature, the participant button, there should be a thing in there to raise your hand. So again, as we are presenting and you like, I got a question, I wanna ask that, or you want us to take a moment to pause around something, to use the raise your hand feature. So if we could get some folks just to go ahead and try that out to make sure that that's working, go ahead and raise your hand in the chat box. All right, I see you, Betty, Keisha, all right, okay. All right, so we got it. So feel free to use the reactions, to clap, the thumbs, like if we were in a meeting together and we would do the spirit hands, or bear witness. If you hear something powerful from Jessica or Maria, use those reactions. If a question comes up, raise your hand. Again, we hope this to be as interactive as possible. And really our spirit is, though we're offering something, we also are trying to receive and understand kind of how this stuff is playing out in your community. So your interaction engagement is critical to our learning, as we're also offering. And Sadia got kicked out again. Or is that another one? All right.
It's another one.
That's another. Sadia has doubled herself. All right. So with that, are we going to another poll, Maria? All right. So this is a fun poll again. So coming back. So drop in this in the chat box. What stage of quarantine are you in? Are you cat number 1, kitty number 2? Are you with your weighted blanket in number 3? Are you ate all your quarantine snacks number 4? I don't know what's happening in number 9. And then in the poll questions, we're asking questions around, have you had any interactions? You of anybody you know have had an interaction with a police or SRO officer during this crisis? It's multiple choice. We definitely had one, like not even 2 days into the quarantine, a young person, a mom had called the cops on a young person, right? And they had detained him right in front of our house. So we were instant cop watch day 2 into quarantine. So if you've had some similar experience, do that. Also asking if your school has cameras is another question. Or does your school, question number 2 is, does your school district have police officers or SROs? And so some no, we just have security guards. Yes, we have police. I don't know. And there is no wrong answers. So we are about halfway through. We want to give it a couple more minutes around the poll question. And again, also be dropping what kind of quarantine cat are you? So I've seen Saudi feels seen. So that's what's up. Somebody's all the above. See a lot of number 8s chomping at the gate, ready to get out. I definitely feel that. All right, we're about 72% through. All right, what kind of quarantine cat are you? 2 all day. All right, Sherazar, Black Love, I see you. Ishmael, 3 and 4. All right, are we ready to end the poll, Maria? You give me a thumbs up. All right, so let's see our results. So most schools have cameras. So you already know before COVID, you were being surveilled, or students were being surveilled. And for the 2 that are no and the we don't know, we're sure that they're surveilling in some kind of other way. And so part of we'll be exploring what that is, or what it could be now. It might have shifted. Does your school have SROs? So the majority of folks have SROs in their schools. Again, the 5 who don't know, part of what we want to be able to do in this conversation at the end is also figure out how we be an offer and be in connection and movement with each other to help y'all figure that out. And has someone had an interaction since during the crisis? And most people know somebody who has had an interaction. 2 folks got a ticket, 2 people have been arrested, and 3 people have been harassed around social distancing, and another 26% say, yeah, they're patrolling our neighborhood and blocking. Again, part of what we've seen in police activity during COVID is that it's the same as it was before. And so this really helps to set the context of the conversation that we want to have around policing. So thank y'all for that. And so the conversation today is really just broken up into 3 parts. One is just setting the baseline, us laying out kind of what is police-free schools and what is this talk around abolition, and then also talking about surveillance in schools as a means of control, both historic and now contemporary. The third part of the workshop is then we'll move into looking at surveillance technology before. What was it before COVID-19? And then we'll look at what surveillance is currently, and what we know it is to be currently. Again, part of this conversation is what we know, and also what we think you all know. You all are experts in your own experience. Something brought you to this workshop, and so if you know something that we might not have discovered yet, we want you to drop it in the chat. Again, we're making an offer for this piece. And then after the end of all that powerful presentation, we'll have some time to do some Q&A at the end. But drop your questions in the chat box. Also, to keep the conversation going in the chat box. And with that, I have done, I believe, my job of getting us settled, getting us in. I hope you are ready for our presentation. If you are, go ahead and give me some reactions, some claps, so you can bring up Maria Fernandez with a round of reaction claps. You said what? Oh.
All right, am I good to go, Jonathan?
You're good to go. There was someone else talking. That wasn't you, huh?
So welcome, everyone. I'm going to do a little bit of the portion around what is surveillance. We've been talking about it. We've been doing, y'all are here and ready to learn and engage. But first, we really wanted to ground this training on the belief that this Know Your Rights training is not being held because we believe that young people's actions should be controlled. But because we really want to make sure that we're protecting young people and families from the possible harm that comes with digital surveillance. And we want to limit the ways in which schools and police departments enter our homes. So it's not about control, it's not about shifting young people's behavior, it's not about muting or silencing young people and families, but it's about equipping us with knowledge and skills to be able to navigate kind of this digital world that we're pushed into because of online learning. And that we do this work because we have an abolitionist politic. So we are practitioners of a world that is yet to exist. And in that world, it is a world that is without prisons, jails, police, ICE, and other law enforcement agencies and institutions that criminalize and profit off the criminalization of Black people, of immigrants, of Black youth, and youth of color at all intersections. And that for us, we've been doing this work under the umbrella of police-free schools, and that means dismantling school policing infrastructure, culture, and practice, ending the militarization and surveillance of young people, families, and schools, and building a new liberatory education system. So we asked the question around abolition at the beginning because we wanted to gauge where people are at, and we wanted to reground that in this training today. All right, so Jessica, if you go to the slide before this one. All right, so what is surveillance? In the entire history of the United States, surveillance has been used as a means of control to control anyone who wasn't white. So people of color, especially Black people, have been under surveillance for centuries, beginning with slave patrols, which were the first police forces. White power structures have monitored, pursued, and persecuted those they considered enemies of the state, including folks and people who we admire and love like Ida B. Wells and W.E.B. Du Bois. And even people who joined the army to fight in wars were still under the threat of surveillance, especially Black servicemen after World War I, Japanese Americans who were seen as a threat during World War II. They were not only surveilled, but also put in internment camps. But the most explicit use of technological infrastructures to support state surveillance was during the civil rights and Black power movements. Under the government's COINTELPRO, we saw the infiltration of Black organizations, phone taps, spying, and entire files created about people they considered subversive or dangerous. Much of this surveillance led to the assassination and imprisonment of Black revolutionary leaders. Similar surveillance happened to the American Indian movement, to the Chicano and farm workers movements, and to the Puerto Rican liberation movements. There's some photos there of some of kind of those movements. And it is not a coincidence that generations of Black people and people of color have been surveilled by the government. Surveillance is a tool of white supremacy. It is used as a means of control. People working for social justice, civil and human rights have been targeted because they are threats to the white supremacist capitalist status quo. That is a lot, but it is very true. And while these types of surveillance were people, informants, and agents watching and keeping notes and sharing notes, the means of surveillance has evolved over time as the evolution of technology. Nowadays, there are cameras, phones, computers that make it way easier to monitor, surveil, hack into people's lives. If you want to know more about the COINTEL program, after I do my sets of slides, I'm going to drop in the chat box the link to watch COINTELPRO 101 that Freedom Archives has for free for everyone. And then I'll also drop in a link around the Zinn education project that has done a series of kind of training tools and teaching tools about the surveillance of the freedom struggle. So are police departments and government agencies just surveilling certain type of people in certain types of places? No. Surveillance is happening in all aspects of our lives, in the schools we attend or visit, at the jobs and in the neighborhoods that we live in, from cameras in the entrances of businesses, to the police patrolling neighborhoods, to the cameras on or near schools. We can assume that our movements across places and spaces are being monitored in some way, shape, or form. So they are patrolling us and surveilling us everywhere we go. So again, police departments, school districts, federal agencies like the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and ICE have all used surveillance technologies to track, monitor, detain, arrest, and deport Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities and suppress movements. Here are some examples of the last maybe 10 plus years. So the FBI's Muslim surveillance that we saw after 9/11, ICE and Department of Homeland Security using facial recognition on Department of Motor Vehicle licenses, the creation and usage of gang databases that a lot of us have in our cities, and the surveillance of Black Lives Matter protesters and organizers are just to name a few. Most recently, the Senate voted against forbidding law enforcement agencies from getting access to internet browsing and search history without a warrant. So now they could continue to look at our search history and how we browse and what we're looking at without a warrant. It would have been, if passed, it would have been an amendment to the Patriot Act, which passed in 2001, that lets government agencies use quote unquote terrorism as a reason to secretly collect data on millions of people, specifically Muslim people after 9/11. So then what does surveillance under COVID look like? We can expect and are already seeing the increase of policing and surveillance in our communities under the guise of protecting people against coronavirus. Districts are increasing police budgets while cutting much needed services and education budgets, claiming public health. This means that cops and other law enforcement agencies are being used to enforce social distancing measures. But we know that that means that Black people and communities of color will face more policing. We already have seen examples of people being violently arrested for not wearing masks and disproportionately ticketed for not social distancing. So some of the other tactics that folks in the United States, police departments in the United States and across the world are using, in addition to police enforcement, is thermal scanners. So devices that can check our temperature from like 5-10 feet away, right? So our temperature is no longer private information. We have the use of contact tracing. So kind of making webs and connecting and talking and making sure you're reaching out to people to see who has been exposed or not exposed, who has and who doesn't have coronavirus. And then geolocation, which is just a fancy way of saying they're using our cell phone data to track our movements and locations. And they're again saying it that this is the, they want to just make sure that people are staying home that have been exposed. But we know that this technology is really, really dangerous. Lastly, they're continuing to use facial recognition. And Jessica is going to talk more about the use of facial recognition later on. So don't believe the hype. These policing and surveillance tactics do not keep us safe. They're using COVID-19 to build a more invasive and expansive and well-funded surveillance machine that they're going to continue to use post COVID-19. So that's kind of a ground of what surveillance looks like. I know that was a lot of information. We're gonna send out the polls, but just give me a thumbs up if you're still with us. The next portion of the conversation, I'm gonna turn it over to Jessica, who's gonna talk to us about surveillance in schools before COVID-19.
But before then, it's time for another people's poll. Is that right? All right. So people poll number 3,489, social media monitoring progress. So first question is, what social media platform do you use the most? Second question, have you or someone you know ever gotten in trouble for something they posted on social media? Do you know if your school or school district is monitoring students' social media? Question number 4, do you think your school district should be allowed to look through student social media? And that's our 4 questions. So go ahead and register your votes there on social media. Find out who is where. All right, y'all getting quicker with this. We should have poll music. We didn't think about that. I'm a savage. Gussy, bougie, ratchet. All right, we almost through. We're at 80%. And give it one more second, see if we can get 3 more, maybe get to 50. Yeah. 3 more. All right, wishful thinking, it looks like. Let's go ahead and close the poll right here. All right, so most folks are on Instagram. The 19 adults that are on Facebook, we see you. A lot of us are also on Twitter. followed by Snapchat and TikTok. And let's see, question number 2. So most of us, almost 68%, know someone who's gotten in trouble around something they shared on social media. And so I think, you know, if y'all have a story or something to share around that, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I know we've been, in preparing for the workshop, we heard a lot of stories from young people from Chicago around kind of what's been happening with them around social media. And there'll be some stories we share later in the training. Question number 3, do you know if your school is monitoring? And most of us say yes, they know. And most of us don't know, and that's good, and that's part of the reason why we're glad you all are here, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Jessica will talk a little bit about what you can do to find out if they are. And most of us agree that they should not be looking through student social media. 9 of us are saying it depends on what they're monitoring for, and 1 person is they don't know. And so absolutely, we want to welcome all of that. We understand again, our particular position around abolition, also understanding that there is a real need to figure out how we protect young people from harm. And oftentimes we only have a very few systems to do that. And so part of our work as abolitionists, how do we build the student safety systems that don't require policing and punishment and incarceration? So that is our second People's Poll. So thank you for that. And with no other breath, I'm going to turn it over to the lawyer warrior, Jessica, from the Advancement Project to take us into social media monitoring. We can't hear you.
Okay, hold
Oh,
on.
there we go. Now you can. All right.
Okay, I kept talking deliberately because my shit acts up. So please, if my mouth keeps moving and you can't hear me, type it in the chat or someone just unmute themselves and let me know that you can't hear me.
Right. Help us out.
Great. Okay, so the first surveillance technology we're going to talk about is social media monitoring. This is a phrase that refers to exactly what it says: the monitoring and surveillance of people's social media. So many school districts across the country have contracted with companies to monitor students' social media apps like the ones from the poll: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I don't know how TikTok works, but clearly, how many percent? 16 of you are on TikTok, so maybe you can show us older folk how that works. So these companies are able to sell this technology to districts, right, claiming that it's for safety and that it could be used to identify potential violence, academic or mental health issues, or bullying. So the companies, these social media companies, monitoring companies say this, but there's absolutely no evidence to actually back that up. And on top of that, the software is terrible at recognizing humor, sarcasm, slang, languages other than English. So you'll see on the side here the names of some of the biggest companies in the social media monitoring game: Social Sentinel, Digital Stakeout, Geo Listening, etc. And in order to illustrate how these companies work, I'm going to play a quick video, super short. It has some examples of the types of posts that have been flagged by these systems, so bear with me while I try to get this to work. Wow, that worked. Last time I didn't close the tab and we had some other videos playing in the background. So I know that video moves super quickly, but that's exactly how the technology is supposed to work. It flags things constantly and sends notification emails to whoever is in charge of the monitoring of the system, who then decides what to do with it, what to do with that flagged post. As you can see here too, these are the kinds of ridiculous things that are being flagged, right? In one high school in Washington, hold on, let me just, there we go. In one high school in Washington State, a district sent police officers to a student's home just because they posted "tomorrow it will all be over" about their breakup. And similarly in Alabama, where in one school district, 14 students have been expelled over social media posts, 12 of them were Black students. One student was suspended for wearing a sweatshirt honoring her deceased father in an IG photo. The school thought she was in a gang because of the sweater's colors. So you can see all of this is ridiculous, and we can probably all look through our social media and find something that could probably be deemed flaggable, right? So real quick about facial recognition technology, which is the other type of main technology that we're going to talk about. It refers to exactly what it sounds like. It's software that can identify faces in photos or videos and scans them against a database of people. So there are many companies in the facial recognition business, unfortunately, including Amazon, Microsoft, and the others seen here, like the random ones. I'm not going to read them out. You can see them there. We know that there's many problems with this technology, right? First of all, it was created based on an adult white man. So it's still very inaccurate when identifying children, women, people of color, trans and gender nonconforming people. And besides the fact that the technology essentially doesn't work on the vast majority of people, it also is a violation of people's privacy, right? Shouldn't someone be allowed to come and go as they please without being watched and identified by whoever may be watching? There's also little to no guidance on how all this information is kept. So who has access to that database that can identify and misidentify people? So given all of these negatives, it's no wonder that some cities have banned the use of facial recognition technology altogether, like in San Francisco and Oakland. And unfortunately, facial recognition technology companies also know that there's much money to be made from the education sector and have targeted school districts to be their customers. So in one school district that employed the technology, a student who had been expelled went to his sister's graduation. He was seen on the school's cameras and was then escorted out by the sheriff's deputy because the district had put him on a watch list that banned him from school property, making him miss his own sister's graduation. So in both this example and the social media monitoring ones, we can already see how not only is the technology itself faulty, but it's being used to criminalize and punish students for no reason. And on top of that, schools are involving police officers and law enforcement, which we already know means worse outcomes for our communities. The fight to ban facial recognition is happening right now in many of our cities. The most recent fight comes out of Boston, Massachusetts. There, the city council 2 weeks ago introduced a resolution to ban the use of facial recognition technology used by the Boston Police Department. And the proposal outlines what can and can't be shared to the police from school officials. And school administrators would be allowed to share data concerning extreme violence, credible safety threats, and the possession of drugs. However, sensitive data supposedly, such as immigration status and ethnicity, cannot be shared. We have problems with that too, but that'll be another training. While this doesn't end the total surveillance of students, it's a start and an organizing opportunity, right? Because there are places that are trying to fight back against these things. So you may be wondering, why are school districts getting all this technology anyway? Well, like with many things in our society, the answer comes down to money. These companies are very good at selling their product, and they know exactly how to tap into fears that schools have about safety. And we see this happen whenever there's a school shooting, right? School districts are always scrambling to find what is the next magic pill that's gonna automatically mean safety for their people, right? Instead of actually thinking about what students think and need for their own real safety. The education sector itself, we know, is worth billions of dollars. There's a lot of money to be made across all aspects of education in the US, from the textbooks that are created to the computer schools use, and companies know this. So in addition, as technology advances, it gets better and cheaper. Like how a flat screen TV 25 years ago cost thousands of dollars, and today you can get one for like 200. Yeah, the same goes for these social media monitoring and facial recognition technologies. It's relatively cheap for school districts to get this tech. Some school districts have gotten it for only $10,000 a year for their social media monitoring. Compared to the cost of a teacher or a school police officer, for example, it's relatively cheap. Some companies even give away the technology for free, letting the school districts test it out with free trials. One school district in New York State paid $1.4 million for their facial recognition technology. And this was more expensive because they had to buy the entire system, like the cameras, et cetera, that would be used. For schools that already have cameras and would just need the software, it's most likely much cheaper to get that technology. Unfortunately for our communities, it is cheaper for schools to invest in creating a surveilled police state than actually investing in the holistic development of young people in real safety. So that was just surveillance generally on those two things. And now we're going to move more towards what surveillance looks like during this online learning, during this crisis. But before that,
it's time for another people's poll. Wake up! Yeah, if you wasn't paying attention, you paying attention now. It's time for our third people's poll. This one is around online learning. So as we approached kind of the conversation of what surveillance looks like under COVID, we're asking you to answer 3 questions. Is your school or school district doing online learning? Do you have a computer tablet that you are using for online learning? And if you are, your parent is your student, or if you're a youth organizer, the young people that you're working with, you see how we're making the translations there. And has your school district distributed technology to students? And that can be computers, tablets, Wi-Fi. And then if you're a parent or student or someone supporting a student, how has online learning been going for you? I just recently came across I think a learning policy report that they surveyed 1,000 parents around online learning under COVID. Had some very interesting results in terms of who felt like they were making do. Surprisingly, Black parents were like, actually, this thing is okay, and I could get it because your kid's no longer in prison. That was a political joke. All right, moving on. So we get some more votes in. So we're about 59% out. So is your school doing online learning? And keep chatting it up in the box. It looks like there's a great conversation happening there. Or are you like the SpongeBob character, like, all right, I'm out. You're done with the online learning. I got 2 college students and they were so excited to be done with online learning. I think that's been one of the things that we've getting very clear around, that a lot of times it's not about the learning. It's a lot about the social development that's happening, the friendships, the relationships that schools bring and offer. And part of the connection, but that's not new either. We've known that for a long time. There's so much around kind of graduation rates being connected to young people having relationships with at least one caring adult in the school building. So it's a lot of stuff that we already know about what really drives and moves education. All right, we're almost at 70%. We'll give it 2 more seconds. 2. And let's go ahead and close the poll. All right, so so most folks are here because the school district is doing online learning. And as we've been monitoring, it seems like some school districts are even considering, as school comes back in September or the fall, continuing some online learning or some kind of mixture of it. So again, this workshop continues to be relevant as long as we continue to move into this new normal and still learn under pandemic conditions. Question number 2, have you received a tablet? So most folks are using their own family tablet. About 33% are using one from a school. And about 24% talk about the internet being some trash. And one person doesn't have internet at home. And again, we'll talk about the connections between surveillance, the kind of digital apartheid that we are now understanding is real in our schools and in our communities. And then question number 3, has your school district distributed technology? And most folks are yes. They got tablets, and then it's about tied both ways. Like, yes, they given them out, but yes, it hasn't been enough. And how has online learning been going? And most folks say it's okay, but classes are not engaging. Again, I think that mirrors some of the reports that I were reading. And the next one was 50%. Most folks are saying they hate it, it's boring, and I'm not learning anything. And I would ask y'all, is that any different than what y'all was doing when we were in school? Hashtag facts. All right. And then some folks don't get on, and then another 4 the school year is over. So we'll talk about what happens when folks may not get on, what might be happening, and how us not showing up or being disengaged in learning might make us susceptible or vulnerable to police surveillance and social media monitoring. So again, thank y'all for that. Continue to share the stories in the chat. And with that, I'm turning it back over to Jessica to take us into our third part around online learning.
Okay, every time I mute and unmute, it messes up. So you can hear me, right? Great. So we all know this pandemic has already fundamentally changed life for us in the US. Unprecedented school closures in March never happened before. Almost every public school in the country has been closed for weeks. Most places, however, chose not to end the school year then, but instead switched to online learning. So first, every state in the US has a constitution that guarantees free public education. Everyone is entitled to attend public schools, and this applies even if your school has closed and is still doing distance or online learning. Notice I didn't say a right to an education in every state, but every state constitution has education in it because every state has decided that education is a fundamental role that they should be providing for people, right? So what if the switch to online learning has been rocky, to say the least. For many of our communities, there exists a digital divide. We simply do not all have access to the devices and services that would even make online learning possible. So what if you go to a school that is closed for the school year? Do you still have to go to school? So as previously mentioned, if your school is offering distance learning, either online or through hard copy materials, then you should participate if you are able. Could you get in trouble for not participating in the online learning your school has? Maybe. Although some school districts have said they would not penalize students for bad grades or no attendance during the pandemic, it's within their discretion to do so. If you can't participate, however, your school should not be punishing you for not attending. Like, that would be ridiculous. With the move to online learning, we've seen some troubling shifts as school districts have tried to adapt, right? In Florida, Orange County Public Schools announced that school resource officers would start going door to door to try to find students the district had not been able to get a hold of. And this was about 1.3% of students there that had not been participating in schoolwork, which in that county is thousands of students that then SROs were supposedly gonna go to their house to check up on them. So why are we concerned? We're concerned about the shift to online learning for a number of reasons. First, many school districts have adopted the new technologies and online learning systems that they have not previously used or weren't using as much as they are now. And we're concerned that because of that urgency, there has not been enough vetting, research, or guidance about the use of these technologies. School districts now have more access to student information than ever before. Most programs and apps track and keep data. We know that Google has been a main provider of technology for school districts. How many of your schools and school districts are using Chromebooks? You can answer in the chat to that one. Google, unfortunately, is notorious for data mining students in their education app used by a lot of districts. And there you can see a clip from when they got caught doing that. And data mining, by the way, is just another way of saying they track your online behavior, your patterns, what you click, what you write, what you search. Data isn't neutral, right? We have no idea what they could be using your data for, but we do know that they can make billions off of us. We know that even when an app or device is provided for free, it never really is. When you are using a free app, it just means that you are the product and your actions are what is being tracked, studied, and sold. So of course we have many questions about what is going on now. What kinds of data are schools keeping? Who has access to that data? What are schools telling students and families about what they do with that data? We have already seen that schools are getting law enforcement involved. What else are they sharing with police? At this point, we just don't know, and we have more questions than answers. So what if you're in a situation where you got a laptop or tablet from your school to do your online learning with? Can the school monitor your schoolwork? Maybe. Some programs do monitor what you type or look up. Some are designed so that teachers can also see what students are doing. As for doing something other than schoolwork on the device, this can probably be monitored as well. Your device may have come with software that tracks anything you do on it, even if it's unrelated to schoolwork. So let's say you're at home and you're having some lemonade because it's hot and you were thirsty. It's about to be summer. I know I like some lemonade. I prefer limeade. Limes over lemons all day. Anyway, you accidentally knock it over and oh no, it's spilled on the computer. Can you get in trouble if something happens to the laptop? Does your family have to pay for it? When you got the device from your school, they should have shared with you policy or guidance or some other document explaining what the protocol would be if something happened to the computer. If you didn't receive anything and there's nowhere in the code of conduct or school manual, this is definitely a problem. The move to online learning was so haphazard, it's safe to assume there may not be a policy at all. So if your school lent out equipment or technology before COVID-19, then they may be following the policy they have for that. On the right side of the slide here, you'll see an actual form that a school in Philadelphia has been using, and you can see how little information is even on the form. It's basically just your name, your number. It says nothing about what happens to the computer. It says nothing else. So what if you have your own computer or tablet that you do the schoolwork on? Your school can probably still monitor that schoolwork because even if it is your own device, the programs the school uses might still be tracking your activity and data, even if it's your own computer. And what about when you use your own computer for non-school related stuff? Typically, your school would not be able to monitor anything you do on your own device unless they are doing social media monitoring, in which case they could still be looking at your posts no matter what device you use to post it on. So we've heard of some cases in which schools are making students use the video function of their computers when they do online learning. Do you have to use it? It depends. If this is something your teacher is requiring, ask them to give you the policy that says that rule. Schools have no way to control the types of devices students are using or the types of internet. For some connections, video just doesn't work. I'm having trouble on this webinar connecting. You should not be penalized for not using video. We already know that there's a digital divide. Even the poll that we shared earlier, you can see that people just have different connectivity access, right? So some students simply won't even be able to use a computer, much less video on top of that. And it's unreasonable for a teacher or school to require that you use your camera. So right now, I'll turn it back to Jonathan real quick to talk about some youth voices from the ground.
All right. And we want, as also we're sharing kind of the stories, if you're a young person or connected to a young person and you have a story that you want to share, that we actually go ahead and drop it in the chat box. But we just wanted to talk about kind of two experiences that again kind of drove us to offer this workshop. One had been kind of the situation that we've seen develop in Philadelphia. And as you can see here in the pictures, these are students doing their homework in the school parking lot. because they don't have access to Wi-Fi. So you see them there with their mask on, sitting outside, trying to get Wi-Fi. And as it talks about there, almost 1 in 5 families in Philadelphia don't have internet access, and that students are left to scrounge around for internet, and thus the hashtag parking lot Wi-Fi. So we've seen kind of, again, what the learning conditions are. And you can imagine 3 Black kids in a parking lot with laptops. If I'm a police officer, I might come through. That feels like gang right there for me. Y'all learning stuff, trying to get free? Pull up. And then the second one from Brighton Park Neighborhood Council, and this is when we were preparing, young person Jen talked about, it feels like I have to now be my own teacher, that I'm in these classes, but I'm not really learning anything. And how is this what Chicago and Chicago public schools have to offer us? So again, kind of voices from young people on the ground. I know there are young people in the audience tonight. And so if you have a story that you want to share about your online learning experience, similar to what we've heard from young people from Philadelphia and Chicago, we invite you to share that. Also, if you work with young folks as well. And again, we want to thank Jen for helping us with this workshop and some of the experiences. And so for the questions for participants is, does this resonate with you? What are you experiencing? What have you heard from other students, young people, and families? And if you could go ahead and drop those in the chat box, and then maybe I'll read 1 or 2. Or do we want to innovate? Maybe offer a quick story? Maria, no? We have time? All right. Drop them in the chat box. I got them to shake off no.
Sing Savage again for us.
All right. So we are going to move on. Again, we'll invite you to share your story with it. Oh, now you're good with it? What does that mean? Help. To go ahead and move forward. All right. So then I'm handing it back over to Jessica, yes?
Yes.
All right.
So back to some more questions that I'm going to talk at you about. So what if you are using social media on your own device? Got my little phone right here. Can your school see everything you do? It depends. If your school is doing social media monitoring, then they can see your social media even if you are using your own device. And the same goes for if you are using a school provided device. If your school is doing social media monitoring, then they're looking at your posts, especially if it's a post made on a school device. In terms of whether you can get in trouble for your social media posts, unfortunately, schools have some leeway in what they can discipline students for. So it is possible for you to get in trouble for something the school finds on your social media. In addition, if the activity disrupts the school environment, they can most likely regulate it, even if it's something you post on the weekend or outside of school hours. So you're probably wondering by now, how do I even know if my school is doing social media monitoring? And I saw from the poll that 20 of you know that your school and school district are using it. Well, if you didn't, the first step would be to ask your teacher, principal, or school district official. If they don't know, that's a very big problem, obviously. They should be able to give you a yes or no answer. And if they say yes, ask for more information about it. Since when have they been doing it? Who is doing the monitoring? What happens when a post gets flagged? In most cases, your teacher or principal or school district official may not want to tell you, or they may say they don't know. What do you do next? The next step would be to try to find your school board meeting notes or agendas, because these technology companies are outside vendors, right? So the school district needs to contract with them in order to get the technology. And for most school districts, this means that the school board has to vote on this contract. This is obviously for places with school boards. Many school districts post their board meeting notes and agendas online, making it easier for you to search. And basically what I would do is try looking for the names of the companies that we mentioned earlier, right? So if you're looking through your school board meeting notes and you see Social Sentinel, that probably means that they have a contract with that social media monitoring company, because that's basically all that company does. If you're still not finding anything, or you did find out that your school district has it and want a copy of the contract so you can see what it says, you can always file a public information request or Freedom of Information Act request, FOIA. On the right of this slide, you'll see a contract that was gotten after a public information request to the Minnetonka Public Schools District in Minnesota. One other way to find out whether your school district has these is to Google it. You may be able to find an article or a post or somebody that mentions it. But basically, we know that this is not something that school districts are trying to advertise and let people know willy-nilly, because I'm sure, like people on this call, if you're probably getting outraged at it, and they know that if they publicized it or made it something like that they announced to everyone and let everyone know and explained what it was, people would probably have a problem with it. I know I've gone on and on about all the things the school can monitor and surveil. I thought we had rights. What about student rights? Students, like everyone else in the US, have rights guaranteed to them in the Constitution, including the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and the Fourth Amendment, right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. So if you have these rights, why can you still get in trouble in school for saying something on social media? Well, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has said that there are still certain limits on students' freedom of speech. It cannot disrupt educational activity, and it cannot interfere with the rights of others. So for example, if you say something on IG Live on a Saturday that results in a fight at school on Monday, the school may be allowed to discipline you for that post, because they would say that the fight disrupted education activity. So all of these things leads us to questions about what school discipline looks like when we aren't even in school, right? School's been closed. How can they still discipline you? You should check your school's manual or code of conduct to see what they say about online posts or social media. They may have policies about it in there already. As for getting in trouble during this pandemic, if your school is still doing online learning, then the code of conduct would still apply. They could still punish you for violations because school technically is still going on. However, if you do get in trouble during this crisis, please reach out to your local youth organizer, because we are living in unprecedented and scary times, and you shouldn't have to worry about getting in trouble in school on top of everything else that we know we need to deal with. Unfortunately, we've been hearing that many school districts are still following through with suspension and the expulsions during this crisis, so it's definitely still happening. Our friends at the East Bay Community Law Center in Oakland, including, I saw Oscar is on this, or he was on earlier. Hi, Oscar. Shared Jason's story, highlighting that even as schools are closed, many school districts are still requiring young people to serve suspensions and expulsions. I'm just gonna read this quote out loud, just follow along, whatever. Jason's family has been fighting for years to ensure his school provides therapeutic counseling, but the district has repeatedly denied the request. Jason is a 12-year-old Black student who has a learning disability in addition to generalized anxiety disorder and depression. This year, Jason's social emotional needs escalated, which led to multiple physical conflicts with peers. Jason's school recommended him for expulsion instead of providing the necessary supports. After the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the district told Jason's family that they intended to continue with the expulsion process. Jason is fighting to stay in school and is receiving minimal instruction, only 1 hour per day, and the district is moving forward with the expulsion process. On that kind of downer note, I'm going to kick it back to Jonathan to talk about what we can do to fight against all these terrible things.
That's great. All right. So again, part of what we're up to is that, like we've seen, and like we continue to restate, what we're up to is that we don't want the school to prison pipeline to follow us and our young people into our homes, under this pandemic. And so part of what we are urging folks is that to know your rights, but also know our reality, and that the school to prison pipeline pre-existed COVID-19. It exists currently in COVID-19, and it will exist after COVID-19, and that school districts don't protect young people, and that we have to protect ourselves and really figure out how to hold districts accountable to end the surveillance and the policing and the criminalization of students. And that is part of our work to win police-free schools. That is a work and a task that continues even under pandemic conditions, and even is heightened because of pandemic conditions. And so we kind of have three things that we're asking folks to do to consider as we walk out, be prepared to end this presentation. Is one, figure out how to document school policies. Again, Jessica has laid out some ways that you all can kind of Google search and read the school board meeting notes. We know BPNC in Chicago, the young people there are a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request specialists, as well as collecting stories from young folk. Again, one of the things that we've seen in kind of looking at how the crisis has played out is that the story of young people of color and oppressed youth have been not lifted up and elevated. And then the last one is really to organize. Again, who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. And that our best defense against police surveillance and ending the school to prison pipeline is to organize. Next slide. So where do we go from here? So we just didn't want to leave without offering some practical tips, some things that young people can do, that as youth organizers you can teach young people to do. As parents, we can help young people understand how to protect themselves from evasive policing and surveillance under COVID. And again, very similar to how we might have the conversation around policing with our young folk, and being very clear that no one singular tactic or strategy guarantees our safety or even guarantees our rights will be acknowledged. We do believe that these practices will at least make it difficult or put us in a better position to be able to survive contact and surveillance from the police. And so the first one is, I know y'all are all trying to get your blue checks on your profiles, but we really recommend that you keep your social media profiles private. Like we know from Chicago that there's a person that they've hired whose sole job is to monitor social media accounts, right? And so we're sure that other school districts are doing the same. Or you gotta ask yourself, what's that SRO doing now that he ain't walking the hallways harassing students and assaulting them? He might be monitoring your stuff online, right? Stay woke.
I need answers.
The other one is to put the tape over your camera when not in use. To again, sometimes what we've seen with the technology is that they can cut it on without us being aware of it, or operate it remotely, particularly if you're using the school district's equipment, right? So put some tape over it to cover it. Also, just assume that anything you post can be looked at by your school district and or law enforcement. Again, there's stories of, again, a young person lamenting the end of a relationship that ended up with a police showing up at her door, right? And so just assume that it is going to be looked at, right? Again, not asking you to change it or do anything different, not trying to curtail your free speech, but just understand that that is the reality that we're living under. What we've seen is, again, we've been really creative around coding. My little favorite history tidbit is that the average age of a runaway slave during that period was a young person between the ages of 13 and 19. And so y'all are in the process of building freedom, coming up with new codes. And so we know that folks have started to use ways to exclude certain letters in words so that they don't show up on search engines. And so that's a tip that we've seen happening out there. And then the last piece is just keeping an eye on decision makers around these issues, right? From your principals to your local government. Again, what we've seen under COVID-19 is more of the same response, but under more pressure, right? And so the pandemic has not changed their fundamental response. So thus we cannot change our fundamental response, which is to keep each other safe and to organize for our own safety and keep each other safe. So I think that is it, right? We've done it. We got through all the slides. And we want to take some time to just see if there's some questions from the audience. So once again, if you have some questions, go ahead and use that raise the hand button and or drop it in the chat. We have our chat folks looking for questions, and we'll try to answer it to the best of our ability. So we thank y'all for listening. Hope this has been useful to helping you keep young people safe and keeping all of ourselves safe and keeping the school to prison pipeline out of our homes and hopefully continue to move us towards police-free schools. So any questions? Questions?
There's a hand up.
I see a hand. Do we want to take them off mute? Go ahead, ask your question. Smalls. I don't know how to say your first name. All right, go ahead, ask your question.
Do you know like when this was started or like yeah or
What's
where
it?
it originated?
What's the it?
The surveillance process itself.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I mean, outside of as kind of we historically arced it since the beginning, since we were dragged over here and our land and some of us our land was stolen. But I guess Jessica, I don't know if you have a more specific answer, kind of this modern iteration of surveillance and social media monitoring.
Yeah. I don't have a full specific question. I was just, like curious about when the year was that this started, but like you have answered it perfectly.
But yeah, Jessica can also
add, just for the social media monitoring and facial recognition are both pretty recent, let's say within the last 10 years. So that's when those technologies have really been created and come up. Obviously, social media monitoring is more recent because social media is more recent.
I would also add in that particular piece is that we've seen a rise in the use of social media monitoring under the guise of like, we have to keep schools safe and we have to monitor students for what they're saying to prevent school shootings, which we know actually is not effective, nor is it real, because we know who the real school shooters are. It's not our people on social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That has been an uptick since a lot of school shootings, particularly of Parkland. I think I remember there was a marked uptick in social media monitoring around that. Any other questions? Oh, I know one question. Y'all like, when are we going to get the slides? Yes, you will get the slides. Was it recorded? Yes, it was recorded. We'll share out the recording. So I got those two questions checked. Any other questions, or I guess even if there's a reflection that folks may have, if not, we can start to move towards close. All right.
Can young people file FOIAs to get the information about the social media monitoring? Who can file those?
Anyone. In fact, in the breakout that I had, I talked to someone named Destiny. I don't know if she's still on the line. She's from Chicago, but she's a freshman in high school. And she said last summer she filed a FOIA.
Yeah, Andrea helped me. Just wanted to give her props.
Yay, Destiny. All right. It feels like we are full and have a lot to think about and a lot of organizing to do. And so if there are no questions, we'll go to our last slide. And ultimately, if we were doing this Know Your Rights training with the police or school police, right, we would ultimately come back to the rights that we have will be the rights that we have the power to organize, to win, and maintain. And that our ultimate answer to knowing our rights is knowing that we must organize, organize, organize. And that this workshop, we hope that you take what we provided, figure out how to chop it up even more to bring it back to the young people that you're working with, that you're organizing with, that you love and care for. And we'd love to hear how y'all are implementing it or using it or improvising it for your own organizing, as well as if incidents happen, you hear something, we want to be in connection with folks and be an ally and an accomplice for freedom and abolition. So to stay connected with us, follow the hashtag Police Free Schools. You can follow all the organizations here, the Alliance for Educational Justice at For Ed Justice, the Advancement Project at Ed under thingy, whatever that's called, Project, BPNC Chicago, and 215 Student Union. And if you haven't had a chance, go to the We Came to Learn website, where you can learn more about the assault at work that we started, the Police Free Schools campaign, and the amazing work that young people all over the country are doing to really challenge police presence and to really usher in a new era of abolition and really bring an end to the school to prison pipeline. And we hope that this webinar was a contribution towards that end, helping to keep us all safe during the pandemic. And so with that, we are complete. And we can say goodnight, yes? Got some music, take us out some music. I guess y'all can come off mute too if y'all wanted to shout some people out that y'all saw. I'm gonna unmute everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Oscar,
Bye.
Bye. COVID in the house.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Hey,
everyone.
Hey, Karina. Thank you. All right. Amanda.
All right, Jomo.
All right, Keno. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Come back with something. All right.
Little son, what's going, Maria?
All right.
Oh, it's so good to see y'all and hear y'all.
Or do you want us to stay on? Or
how y'all feeling?
All right, Chanel.
I'm sharing the screen.
Yeah,
wow, Chanel was on?
Yeah, Chanel Morris is still on. And Matt.
Yo, Caesar's picture is giving me so much life.
The furnace.
That's a mood.
I'm about to make memes. Not pictures.
All right, thank y'all for coming.